Hey guys, welcome to Planet Victory, and what we are looking at today is some Firefall. This is a new MMO that's coming out by Red 5 Studios. It's not out yet, but I did manage to play some of the beta, and I wanted to bring you guys my first impressions. So I'm going to talk about some of the specific details of the game, and that's going to be the majority of this video. But if you want to just skip ahead to my general overall conclusions and impressions, you can just feel free to hit the link below. Now, when you log in to start the game, I do not have access to all the classes. There are 5 classes, which they call Battleframes in this game. But you can only make one character and then swap between the Battleframes, but I could only swap between 3 at a time. I could try all the different battle frames, but I'd have to like sell one of my battle frames first to make room to buy a 4th one. So I just didn't do that. I did end up playing 3 of the battle frames, 3 of the 5, and the ones that I played were the Assault, the Recon, and the Biotech. The 2 that I did not have a chance to play were the Dreadnought and the Engineer. Now, the footage you're watching here is from the Assault class, or Assault battle frame, but before I can talk about the Assault battle frame, I should talk about battle frames in general. So the way that they work is each class has only 2 weapons. The first is a primary or signature weapon, and this is a weapon that's unique to your class. Then you have a secondary weapon, which is one of 4 weapons that are common to all classes. And the idea here is that you can fill a gap or weakness that your class seems to naturally have by choosing an appropriate secondary weapon. So for the Assault class, their primary or signature weapon is called the Plasma Rifle, I think it's called. And this weapon shoots a kind of moderately arcing projectile that kind of explodes into an area of effect. So it's kind of reminiscent of Tribes and the Spin Fuser. Now, while you only have 2 weapons, a lot of these weapons actually have a secondary fire. So in the case of the Assault class, the secondary fire for their signature weapon is kind of like a close-range shotgun. It shoots out pellets. So already with just the Assault signature weapon, it's a pretty well-rounded class. With the regular fire, you have about a medium range. You can't get too close because you don't want to splash damage yourself. And you can't get too far because it's actually kind of difficult to track with the arc and the slow movement of the projectile. But for the close range, then you have your secondary shotgun type of fire. And I like that duality because actually the shotgun can do more damage than your primary fire if you're at that close range. So there's always a trade-off, and it's like you might want to be in their face. Of course, you're more vulnerable if you are. And if you can keep your distance, then you're safer, but you might not be doing as much damage. And also the fact that it's an area of effect weapon is useful for different situations. If you're fighting one guy, you might choose to go up close so that you can use the shotgun, but if there's a couple guys running around, you might want to back off so that you can use your area of effect. And this is actually really cool. The description of the Assault class is supposed to be fairly quick, light on their feet, maybe not the fastest, but Recon might be faster, but fairly mobile and high offensive capabilities, in-your-face damage. And I think it's fairly accurate. That's what it feels like when you're playing. I really did feel like it was a powerful character, and that made it very fun to play. Their secondary weapon is an Assault Rifle, which you see here. I almost never switch to it, except what I've been trying to do is spec out my Assault Rifle to cover my long-range weakness that the Assault character has. I find they do close range very well and mid-range very well. So I stay with the Assault Rifle, and I try to spec it for even increased accuracy if I can. I'm not sure how far I'll be able to go with that. There's different tiers of battle frames. I've only gotten to the first one, I assume. I'll probably have more options the more you progress. But it's a pretty good all-around kit. So what's the other thing that these battle frames have besides their weapons? They also have skills. And from what I saw, each battle frame has about 3 skills that you can choose from, and these are unique skills. It seems there's no overlap between the different battle frames. Now, you have a choice of about 3 skills, but you can only actually equip about 2, and you unlock these slowly. You don't actually start out with them. So the first is an Afterburner skill, which when you trigger it, you basically just increase your movement speed, it seems, by a small percentage. It might be as much as maybe 20%. And it seems to work for both while you're jumping, like rocket packing, or while you're just sprinting on the ground. So it's a limited time sprint. I actually don't use it that much because I find that the increase in speed was not that noticeable to make it worthwhile. Like, I didn't feel like it would improve my chances tactically in any situation. I couldn't get away in a meaningfully fast enough way to really change the outcome. But I imagine, like, as you progress, you can probably improve that to a degree where it becomes more and more useful. Second skill that they have is the crater. And this is basically like a giant aerial stomp. What happens is you boost up into the air and then you come back down and you do a fairly large, I think it's fairly large, area of effect damage that's pretty powerful, maybe in the 700 range. So if you consider a direct hit with your primary gun is 400, this is, I think, somewhere in the 700 range, which is pretty good. It's basically 2 direct hits, but also an area of effect. This is actually a pretty cool skill, and it visually looks really cool too, so landing them is really cool, but in practice I find I had a lot of difficulty actually landing, and you'll see some footage that I'll put up. You'll see I think I've failed at trying to use the crater more times than I've succeeded, so I eventually stopped using it. It's possible that I just need more practice to get better at it, but yeah, the fact that it actually takes a lot of practice, or it's kind of difficult to land it exactly how you want, makes it less of an attractive option for me. And the third skill the Assault has is this pulse shot. I don't remember what it's called actually, but it's basically like it shoots a slow moving projectile in straight forward direction for limited range. It actually just kind of disappears after it gets about 10 or 20 meters from you, and it moves really slow, and it just does a fairly decent amount of damage. So it's almost like an uninspired kind of skill, but I guess one of the benefits it has is it can just move through guys, so I think everybody that you hit in a line will take that damage, and the damage is pretty good. I think it's in the 500s, but I only really use that as like just an extra shot of something. Like, let's say you're using the shotgun and you ran out of ammo, and instead of reloading you can now hit this button and finish guys off. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to line guys up because the shot moves so slow, so yeah. I couldn't find a really great way to use it, but those are the skills. I ended up trying to use this crater and that one. But honestly, because the primary gun is so versatile, that's usually what I spend most of my time with the Assault, and I don't even end up touching those other skills or my secondary gun that much. So now, moving on, the second class that I tried out, basically you can buy your Battleframes as soon as you collect some of this like in-game dropped crystals, which is kind of like a currency. I could unlock a choice of my next Battleframe, and I went with a Recon. The Recon is basically a sniper class, and their signature weapon is basically a sniper rifle, which no one else can get, and it's a long-range scoped rifle that supposedly does more damage than pretty much anything. And I guess if you get a headshot, it's really good. Their secondary weapon, you start out with an SMG, but like I said, the secondaries are swappable between a common pool of weapons. The secondary weapons are SMGs, assault rifles, grenade launcher, and shotgun, those 4 options. So the Recon starts with the SMG. Now, a Recon or sniper class, I'm always very curious to play. I'm always very attracted to trying to play them, but more often than not, I'm usually disappointed playing with them. I find in most games they're the most difficult class to play effectively, and a lot of the times I kind of feel underpowered. Definitely in this game I feel underpowered. Another game, for example, would be Tribes. I definitely feel the Recon class is underpowered. And it might just be a skill ceiling, like a skill potential. Like if I was really pro at playing the sniper or the Recon, if I could get headshots all the time, then the sniper would reach its potential, and its potential is higher than other classes. But since it's so difficult to do so, most of the time you're playing at a lower level than the other classes. And that's pretty much how I felt with this class. I felt it was really difficult to get high damage or meaningful shots with the sniper rifle. The advantage supposedly is that you have the longest range of anybody else. But the range isn't really a free ticket for anything, because you can scope down in your range and shoot one of these enemies at a far distance, but they're not going to ignore you. They're still going to see you, and then they're going to advance towards you. So you have maybe a few shots that you can get off on the group of enemies at long range before they're engaging you at their range, and they're actually able to attack you. And the closer they get, the less effective I find the sniper rifle is. Now, one of the reasons I found it more difficult to play the Recon class than I think should be is because I had a lot of difficulty with the mouse controls, with the zoomed-in scope. Now, the problem seems to be with the sensitivity. When I'm not zoomed in, I like to have a fairly high sensitivity, and the default sensitivity that the game starts at I find very low. So I increase that sensitivity to become more comfortable, but as soon as I zoom in, because I have set such a high sensitivity, the motion seems really blocky and chunky, and it's not smooth, and that makes it very hard to aim at guys precisely. You'll see some footage I put up where when I'm zoomed in, you'll see the cursor or the crosshairs really just blocking and chunking all over the place. And you'll see that, like, even while you're zoomed in, the type of range, the far range that you want to be useful at, the guys are still really small on the screen. The field of view is not extremely zoomed in while you're looking at the sniper scope, so you have to be very precise, and even more precise to get a headshot. And just with that kind of blocky sensitivity, I found it very difficult to actually pull off any kind of headshots consistently. So that's the main reason why I felt debilitated in playing the Recon class very well. So eventually I decided that the problem was with my sensitivity, and so I tried to start lowering it to find some kind of compromise, but eventually it was a compromise. Now there is a secondary setting specifically in the game for your scope in sensitivity, which supposedly would do exactly what you wanted to do. So you can have your not zoomed in scope at one sensitivity and your zoomed in scope at another, exactly both how you want. But unfortunately, in this beta at least, it didn't seem to have any effect on my mouse. And I don't have a cheapo mouse. It's a laser mouse, but I still had problems with that, even though I don't have problems in other games. So the way I eventually started playing with the sniper is having to kind of use this tactic where I would just roughly aim with the mouse, and then I had to actually side strafe left and right to eventually put the final fine-tunement on, you know, where my crosshair is aiming. And I think that's probably a tactic that like really good snipers in these games use, but that's eventually what I had to do to get like any kind of headshot. So I hope they do address that and fix it to make it the mouse movement a lot smoother while I'm aiming, and then I would probably enjoy playing that class a lot more. Another reason why I thought the sniper was a little bit underpowered is because okay, the way the sniping mechanic works is you have a charge up time while you're zoomed in. Like if you fire from the hip, your gun only does like 100 damage or something, which is really small. It's probably like one of the worst. Like compared to the assault that I was just talking about, does 400 damage on a direct hit and can do anywhere from 100 to up to the 400 with splash damage. The sniper gun seems to do maybe 1 or maybe 200 damage if you fire from the hip. And as soon as you zoom in, there's kind of like a progress bar, a bar that goes across the screen, and you have to wait maybe 2 or 3 seconds for it to reach the maximum, and that bar represents the damage multiplier that you will do. So to get a full damage shot, you have to zoom in and then wait 3 seconds before you do your shot to get the most damage. So even if you're skillful at aiming, you cannot shoot faster, because if you shoot faster, you'll be doing less damage. It's kind of cool mechanic. I like it. I get it and I understand it, and it does, you know, encourage or promote you to take your time with your shots, which is kind of cool. But I think the max damage is somewhere in the 500s, maybe 550 damage, which is quite low compared to, if you look at the assault, you can do 400 damage like every second versus, you know, 500 damage every 3 seconds. So the overall damage output for the Recon is actually quite small, and the only redeeming factors is that supposedly you're so far away, and supposedly you can get critical hits more consistently. I think the critical hit multiplier is probably like 1.5, so you might do like 750 damage. But there you have it. I mean, the Recon is much more of a high risk option, like you might miss, and if you miss, the penalty is big because you have to wait another 3 seconds to try another shot. So it definitely seems like a high skill class to play at the same potential that many of the other classes are able to play much more readily. The Recon class I find has the biggest gap in their versatility, is the least versatile character, because their primary weapon, you generally shoot with it zoomed in, and that's only at extreme far range. The closer you get, it gets quite hard to hit guys, especially because you can't like no scope and you can't quick scope. You literally have to wait there for 3 seconds, so you're basically blinded for 3 seconds before you can take the shot. Which, if you compare to like a game like Call of Duty, you can run around and see the full view and just take your snapshot when you need to. So the SMG, it basically tries to fill that close range gap. The SMG is a lot like the assault rifle, obviously, but as in most games, it has a higher rate of fire, it has lower accuracy, and in this game, it has lower overall damage. So I guess it's alright, but I prefer to switch up to the assault rifle because I find the assault rifle is pretty much the same in terms of trying to hit your targets at close range. I don't find much of a benefit, even though theoretically you would have more of a benefit hitting targets with kind of a higher spread and higher rate of fire at really extreme close ranges. But I usually just switched it to the assault rifle because it does more damage overall. And the shotgun is actually not a bad option. I tried that for an extreme close range because I think you can get more damage. Even so, if you kit out with a Recon with a shotgun, you do extreme close range and extreme far range, and you still kind of have a gap in the middle there. Which is alright, which is fine. It's a cool, challenging class to play, but probably the least versatile. So they also have 3 skills that you can use from. One skill is called the Cryo Bolt, or it's basically an ice bolt, and the idea is it freezes them or slows guys down. I find in practice it doesn't freeze them, it maybe slows them down. For PvE, I didn't find it very useful. I didn't really notice the speed at which the enemies slowed down, and the time that it was effective was quite short. So the time that you slow them down is probably less than it takes for you to wait for a full sniper max damage recharge. So you can't really use it for yourself. You maybe use it with your buddies. You slow them down and another sniper takes a shot, or the rest of your team, takes them out. The next type of skill you use is called a resonating bolt, or explosive damage. This one's kind of cool. It's a little bit more versatile. You use a skill, and then you have, for a certain amount of time, every shot that you take is this kind of explosive ammo. So the resonating bolt, as soon as you fire it, you do the normal damage that you would do with your sniper shot, but so basically it impales in your guy, and he's walking around with this glowy fire bolt that's stuck in him, and after about 5 seconds it blows up and does some more damage. Kind of a cool skill, difficult to really use effectively, because when you're engaging one guy, you generally want to finish him off even before the time that the first bolt will explode. So maybe the best uses for really big guys, bosses, definitely be useful to pepper them full of those bolts. I think the damage charge up mechanic applies to the bolts as well, though, so while you could spam out bolts while you've got this skill active for about 5 seconds and litter the ground with your full clip, I think the amount of explosive damage they do is still limited to, or proportional to the amount you've charged up. A cool thing about it is that they do glow, so one of the ancillary kind of uses you could have is they kind of can work like flares. If you're defending a certain area at night and the lighting's not very good, you could actually drop these bolts out for a second and it lights up the area, if nothing else. But again, it's kind of difficult to make it effective because it takes so long for the bolt to explode. I can only see it using on big guys, or if you hit one guy and then forget about that guy thinking that he's gonna die later with your bolt and move on to other guys, that's another way to do it. But again, not really effective because you might have 2 or 3 bolts waiting to explode in 2 or 3 different guys, but they're still running around shooting you. But it's another source of damage. Now, finally, the third skill is called the Long Range Mine, and this is my favorite skill of the Recon class. I found it the most immediately practical and useful. Basically, it shoots a straight projectile exactly in the location that you're pointing with your cursor. It takes a second or two to reach your target, but when it does, It lays there kind of like your resonating bolt. It will blow up much sooner though, maybe about a second or two. It will actually explode and do a large amount of damage over a large area of effect. This is probably the best area of effect option that the Recon has, and I like to use it a lot. It's really good for clearing out smaller bugs and stuff in one shot. Okay, so moving on, the third and final Battletech I was able to try out was called the Biotech. It's kind of like a medic. It is the only class I'm aware of that can do healing. Primary weapon is called a Needler, and it's kind of a rapid fire type of assault rifle, but it's still got a much slower rate of fire than a typical assault rifle or SMG. But I actually found it's quite powerful. Each projectile does 75 damage when you hit, and you could easily get off 4 bullets in. Like, it seems more powerful than any of the other classes I played as far as damage output goes. And because it's so accurate and there's like no recoil, there's just too many things with this gun. If I was going to say any one class is overpowered, or out of the classes I've played, I would say this Biomech is actually the most overpowered that I've played. Which is kind of a change, because usually when you play MMOs, the healer classes are usually very underpowered for damage, and they have this one role, like they're, you know, the healing bitch, or they're just there to, you know, service other people, but they can't really do much damage as a trade-off for the fact that they can help other people. Not the case here. Once I tried this Biotech, that was my class of choice because they were the masters of survivability. At the same time, their actual offense was just as good, if not better, than the other classes. So, anyways, maybe it's just because I haven't found the true potential of the other classes, but the Biotech was definitely on the top of my list. So the primary rapid fire primary is just so accurate and does so much damage. And the magazine size is so huge. You'll see in the clip I have a magazine size of 50. I'm not sure if that's an upgraded version or not, but regardless, if that was upgraded, then I think the original was something like 40. So you can just stand there, hold down your button, and do massive amounts of damage. And it's quite easy to actually get critical shots and headshots because of its high accuracy. Oh, and if you thought that wasn't enough, the fact that the Needler gun actually regenerates your life. Yes, very small amounts. Every hit you get about 8 life, or maybe it's a percentage of life, which means you have even longer that you can just stand off against a guy and empty your clip and stand there and just take him down. Next, talking about versatility, the Biotech weapon does also have a secondary fire, like a shotgun, much like the Assault. The spread is a little bit more accurate, and it's a less powerful version of the Assault, but the rate of fire is faster. But it's almost not needed. I don't use it very much because the primary fire is just so accurate, and it's sustained rapid fire that I can use the primary fire even in close quarters situations pretty much just as easily. One interesting tactic I was using with secondary fire is, as you're holding down primary fire and working their health down, that final last bit you can just in midstream tap your secondary fire button, and unloads basically a barrage of your shotgun, which just finishes off your bad guy that much faster. It doesn't finish them off like too much faster, but it's just a nice kind of gameplay tactic that I started to adopt, and it was kind of fun and satisfying to do. Next, the starting secondary weapon of the medic is in fact the grenade launcher. And if you didn't think this class was strong enough already, this starting weapon is the bomb, because the medic has no area of effect damage until the secondary weapon, but it fills that role so completely that it's just such a versatile class. You've got essentially medium to long range accuracy with your primary fire. You can tweak it a little bit for close range with your shotgun fire of your primary gun. And then when you need to engage multiple enemies at the same time, you've got your grenade launcher to deal out damage over a wide area of effect. So, very good class to play. Those are the weapons. What about the skills? Well, as you might have guessed, they have 2 healing skills and 1 poison offensive skill. So the poison skill kind of, when you use it, it releases like a stream of poison gas clouds behind you, kind of like a streamer, and anybody that walks through it will get poisoned and get damage over time. and meanwhile the poison effect itself is kind of like a smoky, obscuring smoke grenade type of effect. So kind of a cool skill because I'm sure it'd be versatile. You could use it in several different ways, defensively, offensively. I didn't have much luck or success using it. I find when I was trying to use it offensively, I was just running around the enemies, kind of like a headless chicken, doing circles making a cloud of poison around them. But meanwhile, they were shooting me up, and I could have easily just been using my normal weapons to damage them without waiting for the poison. So maybe it could be used defensively much better, but anyways, I didn't have too much experience or luck. Maybe the PvP would be more useful. The other two skills are, the first one is a healing wave, kind of like a healing pulse that heals everybody and anybody in front of you for a certain amount of damage, maybe about 300. And since most of the classes are around 1,000 hit points or so, or a little bit more, a third of their life is pretty good. And you can upgrade all those skills a little bit as you progress the tech trees as well. So this one's good because it's really quick. It's really easy to use. Everybody in front of you, more than one person can get healed. Some interesting options for team play and cooperation. So if you get more than one guy together, you can heal them all in one shot. The other healing skill is called is like a healing orb or healing ball. This one's actually much harder to use, but I ended up kitting with both the healing skills because that's what I wanted to do. I thought Biomedic was about support, and I wanted to be the best support and healing people the most. The way that the healing orb is different is that it shoots a projectile in front of you that as soon as it hits an ally, that's kind of when it explodes into a healing area of effect. So the tricky part about this is that it's actually quite easy to miss an ally shooting this ball. So you can actually waste your shot quite easily, and what I ended up doing was basically getting up to point blank range and then trying to fire off the healing orb to heal people. The healing orb does heal for more hit points than the standard wave, so it's kind of like a more advanced version. And this is the only one that you can actually heal yourself with, because if you hit an ally that's very close to you, then the splash damage carries over to you. So while the healing wave, the original one, you can actually use to heal yourself, this one you can, so I equipped it for that reason as well. But between your needler gun, the primary fire of it, and then the healing ball, it's a very survivable character, and it was the one that I would go to whenever I was trying to solo something, especially if I had to do any kinds of engagements that were not at extreme far range. So for me, the default weapon selection for the Biotech was kind of the perfect loadout. Their signature weapon with a grenade launcher covered all the bases, was very effective, and I didn't want to change the secondary weapon to anything else. Then I also used both healing skills to augment that effect. So I've talked a lot about the specific details of the game and what I've experienced, but what about the big picture? Why do I care about this game, or why do I care about MMO FPSs in general? Well, I love shooters. I love the concept of shooter mechanics. I loved Modern Warfare 1 when it came out. But at the same time, I also like long-scale PvE progression, where you always have something you can work towards and you always feel like you're making progress. I think that's where Firefall's strength really lies. I don't think it does shooting better than other shooters, and I don't think it does PvE better than other MMOs, but it offers both of them at the same time. So to illustrate, I'll give you some examples of other MMO FPSs. Tabula Rasa is a great MMO example, but is definitely lacking some core shooter functionality. It didn't feel like a standalone shooter at all. PlanetSide is a great example of the opposite. It's a great shooter, but there's no PvE campaign, so you never feel like you're journeying through something or winning against something other than against your fellow PvP player. There's some other examples that have tried to mix the two sides a little bit more. Fallen Earth, it's both a shooter and a PvE, but the shooting once again was very wooden. It didn't feel real. And on top of that, the focus was heavily based on crafting, collecting items, and inventory management. So really it was like those things first, and the shooting was not like the center of the game. You spent more time just going across the map. Global Agenda. That was a little bit better. The shooting was better, but still, the skills felt kind of uninspired. There wasn't really any interesting strategy or tactics to how you play, and the progression was really slow. So I think Firefall actually trumps all of those because it's definitely got the core shooter down. It feels just as good as PlanetSide or Tribes, and it definitely has a PvE campaign, but it's not just a gear treadmill. It always has engaging combat as the center of the game. You're always skirmishing with somebody. You're never just feel like you're grinding through something. And that's probably driven by the fact that it has such strong PvP focus. I think it's the PvP that makes for really interesting skills, tactics, and combat dynamics that come out, and that just gets lent over into the whole PvE world. So that's what I think Firefall is really promising platform to, basically have a solid shooter experience but be able to serve it up inside a PvE environment, and that's what I've been waiting for, which I haven't gotten yet from any other MMO FPS. So here's hoping that when it comes out, it all pans out and it is the game that I've been waiting for to play. Okay, well that's my first impressions of the game, guys. Thanks for watching and listening, and I really am looking forward to this game. Can't wait for it to come out. I don't know when that's happening, but hopefully sooner than later. When it does come out, I'm sure I'll be playing lots of it and posting videos on the channel, and hope to see you then.